Jake Morrison stood in front of the big room filled with aliens. He had been doing this job for 20 years now. His hair was gray, and his face showed the stress of dealing with these creatures who thought they were better than humans. The room was huge, made of some kind of crystal that sparkled in the light. 47 different types of aliens sat in their special chairs, each one looking different from the others. Some looked like giant bugs. Others were made of light. Some had tentacles instead of arms. A few looked almost human, but with different colored skin or extra eyes. Jake had learned to talk to all of them over the years. He knew their languages and their customs. But he also knew they looked down on humans that today was supposed to be different. Today they were voting on the Kepler mining rights. Human ships had found this asteroid belt 2 years ago. Human scientists had mapped every rock and mineral deposit. Human engineers had figured out the best way to mine the valuable metals. Now the aliens wanted to take it all away. Amy Foster stood next to Jake. She was young, maybe 30 years old, with bright blue eyes and brown hair. She had been working with Jake for 5 years now. She was smart and quick, and she understood how the alien politics worked. Right now she was counting votes on her computer tablet. "It doesn't look good," she whispered to Jake. "The bugs are voting against us. The light people too. Even the fish people are siding with them." Jake nodded. He had expected this. It was the same story every time. Humans would discover something or invent something new. Then the aliens would find reasons why humans couldn't keep it. They always had excuses. Humans were too young. Humans were too violent. Humans didn't understand galactic law well enough. The big bug alien was talking now. His name was Click-Clack-7, but Jake just called him Seven in his head. Seven was about 8 feet tall, with 6 arms and a head that looked like a triangle. His voice sounded like metal scraping against metal when he talked. "The humans are too new to handle such a big mining operation," Seven said. "They might damage the asteroids. They might hurt the space around them. It would be better if a more experienced species took control." Jake wanted to laugh. Humans had been mining asteroids for 50 years. They had never had a serious accident. They had developed new safety methods that other species now used. But the aliens still called them inexperienced. A creature made of pure energy spoke next. She lived inside a metal box that was shaped like a diamond. Lights flashed on the box when she talked. Her name was too long to pronounce, so everyone just called her Diamond. Her voice sounded like music mixed with static. "Perhaps the humans could work as laborers," Diamond said. "They are good with their hands. They could do the physical work, while a more advanced species handles the planning and management." Jake felt his anger rising. This was exactly what he had been afraid of. The aliens wanted to steal the asteroid belt and then hire humans to do the hard work for cheap pay. It was the same pattern they had used for 30 years. When humans had cured the Red Death disease, the aliens had taken the cure and sold it throughout the galaxy. They gave humans a small payment and called it licensing fees. When humans had invented faster space travel, the aliens had declared it too dangerous for humans to use and took control of it themselves. When humans had developed new farming methods that could grow food on dead planets, the aliens had said humans lacked the wisdom to distribute food properly and took over the program got every time humans did the work. Every time, aliens took the credit and the profits. Amy tugged on Jake's sleeve. "The vote is starting," she said quietly. Jake watched as each alien representative voted. The results were exactly what he had expected. 43 aliens voted to take the mining rights away from humans. Only 4 voted to let humans keep what they had discovered. It wasn't even close. The alien who ran the meetings was a tall, thin creature with gray skin and no hair. His name was Long Nose Prime, and he had been running these meetings for over 100 years. He looked at Jake with his big black eyes and spoke in a voice that sounded bored. "The motion passes," Long-Nose Prime announced. "The Kepler mining rights will be awarded to the Zephyrian Industrial Collective. The human discovery claim is hereby transferred. The humans will be given a finder's fee of 10,000 credits. 10,000 credits. Jake almost laughed out loud. The asteroid belt was worth millions of credits, maybe billions. And the aliens were offering humans 10,000 as a finder's fee for discovering and mapping the whole thing. Jake looked around the room at all the alien faces. Some looked smug. Some looked bored. A few looked like they felt bad about the vote, but not bad enough to change it. These were the beings that humans had been trying to please for 30 years. These were the allies that humans had fought wars for, had shared technology with, had trusted with their lives. Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out his communication device. It was a small black rectangle that could send messages instantly across the galaxy. He pressed a few buttons and sent a coded message to Earth. The message was simple. Protocol 7 is now in effect. Protocol 7 was something that had been planned for years, but never used. It was the signal for all humans to stop cooperating with the Galactic Council. It meant that every human scientist, doctor, engineer, and teacher would return to human space immediately. It meant that all the help humans had been giving to alien worlds would stop. Jake stood up from his chair. The room became quiet as everyone watched him. He picked up his briefcase and his papers. Amy stood up too, along with the other 3 humans in the room. "Where are you going?" Long-Nose Prime asked. "The meeting is not over." Jake turned toward the door. He didn't look back at the aliens. He didn't want to see their faces anymore. "The human delegation is withdrawing from the Galactic Council," Jake said in a loud, clear voice. "Starting right now, all human cooperation with Council projects is ended. All human personnel will return to human space. All human technology sharing is canceled. All human medical and scientific help is stopped." He walked toward the big doors that led out of the chamber. His footsteps echoed in the quiet room. Amy walked beside him, and the other humans followed. "You cannot do this," 7 called out. "You have responsibilities to the galaxy." Jake stopped walking and turned around one last time. He looked at all the aliens who had spent 30 years treating humans like children. He looked at the beings who had taken human discoveries and claimed them as their own. He looked at the creatures who had voted to steal from humans just minutes ago. "Good luck running your civilization without us," Jake said. Then he walked out the door. A chamber erupted in noise behind him. Aliens were shouting at each other in dozens of different languages. Some were angry. Some were confused. Some were starting to realize what had just happened. But Jake didn't care anymore. He was done being treated like a second-class citizen. He was done watching aliens get rich off human work. He was done pretending that the Galactic Council was fair to humans. As he walked down the long hallway toward the exit, Jake felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt free. For the first time in decades, humans were going to put themselves first. And the aliens were about to learn just how much they had been depending on the species they had been treating so badly. The galaxy was about to change forever. The message reached Earth in less than 6 hours. President Susan Walsh was eating breakfast when her aide rushed into her private dining room. The young man's face was pale, and his hands were shaking as he handed her the emergency report. "Protocol 7 has been activated," he said breathlessly. Ambassador Morrison sent the signal from the council chambers. Susan put down her coffee cup slowly. She had hoped this day would never come, but she had been preparing for it anyway. Protocol 7 was the nuclear option, the final card that humanity could play when dealing with the aliens became impossible. "Get me General Adams on the secure line," she ordered. "And wake up Dr. Carter. Tell her we need the full withdrawal plan activated within 12 hours. 3 floors below the president's office, Dr. Lisa Carter was already awake and working. She had been expecting this call for months. The 50-year-old scientist had spent the last 2 years secretly documenting every single way that human knowledge and skills had become part of galactic civilization. What she had found was shocking, even to her. The aliens have no idea how dependent they've become on us, she told her assistant as they pulled up files on the main computer. They think we're just useful helpers. They don't realize we've become the foundation that holds their whole civilization together. The first recall notices went out within an hour. Every human doctor, teacher, engineer, and scientist working in alien space received the same message. Return to human territory immediately. No exceptions. No delays. Pack only what you need and get on the first ship heading toward Earth. Dr. Kevin Walsh was working in the medical center on Proxima Station when he got the message. He was in the middle of treating a Zephyrian patient who had been injured in a mining accident. The bug-like alien was unconscious on the operating table, and Kevin was the only doctor in the system who knew how to repair Zephyrian internal organs. Kevin looked at the message again. Protocol 7. He had never thought he would see those words. He looked down at his patient, then at the 3 alien nurses who were waiting for his orders. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I have to go." "But Dr. Walsh," one of the nurses said, "the patient will die without your help. None of us know how to do this operation." Kevin felt terrible, but his orders were clear. He had to leave immediately. "Contact the Council Medical Board," he said as he removed his surgical gloves. "Tell them to find another surgeon." But there was no other surgeon. Kevin had been the only one who understood how to treat multiple alien species at the same time. He had spent 15 years learning the biology of dozens of different races. He had written the medical procedures that hospitals throughout the galaxy now used. Without him, the alien medical system would start falling apart immediately. Same thing was happening all over the galaxy. Captain Danny Rodriguez was piloting a trade ship through the dangerous Vortex Nebula when he received his recall order. The nebula was filled with space storms and energy fields that could destroy any ship that took the wrong path. Danny was one of only 12 humans who knew how to navigate through it safely. "I have to turn back," Danny told his alien crew. "Orders from Earth." The ship's owner, a tentacled creature named Splash 9, was horrified. "But Captain Rodriguez, we're carrying medical supplies to the outer rim. People will die if we don't get through." Danny felt bad, but he couldn't disobey a Protocol 7 order. "I'm sorry," he said. "You'll have to find another pilot." But there was no other pilot. Danny had trained most of the galaxy's navigators, and none of them could handle the vortex. Nebula alone, a trade route that supplied dozens of worlds with critical supplies, was about to be cut off. On the agricultural world of New Harvest, Dr. Helen Rogers was supervising the planting of crops that would feed 3 billion aliens. She had developed a special farming method that could grow food on planets that had been thought impossible to farm. Her techniques had turned barren worlds into gardens. When the recall order came, Helen was in the middle of solving a crop disease that was threatening to destroy the entire harvest. She had been working on the problem for weeks, and she was close to finding a solution. "I have to leave," she told the alien farmers who worked with her. "Earth is calling all humans home." The farmers looked at her with fear in their eyes. Without Helen's knowledge, the crops would die. Without the crops, billions of aliens would starve. But Helen had no choice. She packed her research notes and headed for the nearest spaceport dock back on Earth. General Peter Adams was coordinating the massive withdrawal operation. Ships were being sent to every corner of the galaxy to pick up human personnel. The logistics were incredible. Thousands of humans were scattered across hundreds of worlds, and they all had to be brought home safely. "How long do we have?" President Walsh asked during an emergency meeting. The aliens haven't figured out what's happening yet, General Adams replied. They think it's just a few humans making a political protest. They don't realize we're pulling everyone out. Dr. Carter was studying reports from across the galaxy. The first systems are already starting to show problems, she said. The defense networks are acting up. Some of the power grids are having issues. The transportation system is getting confused. How long before they realize how serious this is? The president asked. Maybe a week, Dr. Carter answered. Maybe less. The problems are going to get worse very quickly. On the alien worlds, the first signs of trouble were appearing. The planetary defense system around the hegemony home world started showing error messages. The system had been designed by human engineers who understood both human and alien technology. Without them, the computers couldn't talk to each other properly. Communication networks began having problems too. Dr. Gary Thompson had created the translation software that allowed different alien species to talk to each other. The software was incredibly complex, and it needed constant updates and maintenance. Without Gary's team, the translations started becoming garbled and confusing. The Zephyrian Industrial Collective, which had just been awarded the Kepler mining rights, discovered that they couldn't actually start mining. Their equipment was designed to work with human-made navigation systems. Without human technicians to operate the systems, their expensive mining ships were useless. On the Council Station, Longnose Prime was getting reports from all over the galaxy. Humans were disappearing from their jobs. Ships were being abandoned in the middle of space. Medical facilities were shutting down. Agricultural projects were being left unfinished. What is happening? He asked his advisors. Why are all the humans leaving? They're upset about the mining rights vote, one advisor said. They think we treated them unfairly. Longnose Prime made a sound like a snort. They'll be back, he said. They need us more than we need them. Humans have always been dependent on the Council for protection and trade. But he was wrong. The aliens had been dependent on humans for much longer than they realized. Over 30 years, human knowledge and skills had become woven into every part of galactic civilization. The aliens had taken human help for granted, for so long that they had forgotten how to do things without it. Diamond, the energy being who had suggested using humans as laborers, was having her own problems. Her containment system was starting to malfunction. The mathematical equations that kept her energy form stable had been refined by human scientists. Without their constant adjustments, her very existence was becoming unstable. Dr. Carter watched the reports coming in from across the galaxy. It's working faster than we expected, she told President Walsh. The dependency runs deeper than even we realized. The president nodded grimly. Good. Let them see what happens when they treat us like servants instead of partners. Within 48 hours, the galaxy was in chaos. The proud alien civilizations that had dismissed humans as primitive and unimportant were discovering that their entire way of life depended on human knowledge and skills. The species that had voted to steal from humans were now learning what it meant to lose human cooperation. And this was just the beginning. 3 weeks after the humans left, the first real disaster hit the galaxy. The Corvin system was home to 12 billion aliens spread across 6 different worlds. They were proud beings who looked like tall, thin humans, but with blue skin and silver eyes. The Corvins had always claimed that their ancient civilization was superior to human technology. The Corvin defense grid had been protecting their system for over 200 years. But 15 years ago, human engineers had updated the system with new technology. They had connected all the defense satellites with quantum links that could react faster than light. Without the human maintenance teams, these links were starting to fail. Captain Bobby Martinez had been in charge of keeping the Corvin defense grid working. He was a quiet man who preferred working with machines to talking with people. For 15 years, he had been making small adjustments to the system, fixing problems before they became serious. When Protocol 7 was activated, Bobby packed his tools and left on the first ship back to Earth. The Corvins didn't think his departure was important. "We managed our defenses for centuries before the humans arrived," their military leader had said. "We can manage them again," but they were wrong. The quantum links were failing one by one. The defense satellites were losing contact with each other. The system that had protected 12 billion lives was falling apart. The pirates noticed first. For decades, the Corvin system had been impossible to attack because of its perfect defenses. Now, the pirate ships hiding in the asteroid fields detected the system failures. Within hours, 3 large pirate fleets were heading toward Corvin. Space. The attack came at dawn on the 3rd Corvin world. The defense satellites tried to respond, but without the quantum links, they couldn't coordinate their fire. The pirates broke through the outer defenses like they were flying through empty space. General Peter Adams was sitting in his office on Earth when the emergency message from the Corvin government arrived. The message was desperate and full of panic. The Corvins were begging for human help. They offered to pay any price, agree to any terms, if only the humans would come back and fix their defenses. Peter read the message twice and deleted it. He had been warning the galaxy about this exact situation for years. The aliens had ignored his warnings and treated him like he was stupid. Now they wanted his help to fix problems they had created by dismissing human expertise. "Sir," his aide, Colonel Nancy Price said, "the Corvins are sending more messages. They're saying their people are dying." Peter looked out his window at the Earth below. "Tell them to contact the Galactic Council. We don't work for the Council anymore, remember?" But the Galactic Council couldn't help. They had no idea how to fix the quantum defense links that Bobby Martinez had been maintaining. The technology was too advanced for them to understand. The pirates continued their attacks, and the Corvin system fell within a week. The news of the Corvin defeat spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Other alien worlds began checking their own defense systems. Many of them discovered the same problem. Human engineers had been quietly maintaining and upgrading systems throughout the galaxy. Without them, the defenses were failing everywhere. Problems weren't limited to military systems. The Altarian energy beings were facing an even more serious crisis. These aliens lived as pure energy inside special geometric containers. The mathematics that kept their energy forms stable were incredibly complex. Dr. Tony Clark, a human mathematician, had been working on these equations for 20 years. Diamond, the Altarian representative who had suggested using humans as laborers, was now experiencing what humans called energy decay. Her geometric container was losing its ability to hold her energy form together. Without Dr. Clark's constant mathematical adjustments, she was literally falling apart. "Help me," she transmitted to the other council members. "I'm losing cohesion. My existence is becoming unstable." But none of the other aliens understood the mathematics involved. Dr. Clark had been the only person in the galaxy who could work with the complex equations that kept the Altarians alive. Without him, the entire Altarian species was facing extinction. The agricultural crisis was even worse. Dr. Helen Rogers had revolutionized farming across the galaxy with her cross-species pollination techniques. She had figured out how to make plants from different worlds work together to create supercrops that could feed billions of aliens. But these hybrid crops were unstable without constant care. They needed specific nutrients at exact times. They required precise temperature and humidity controls. Most importantly, they needed regular genetic adjustments to prevent them from reverting to their original, less productive forms. The Zephyrian home world was the first to see total crop failure. The bug-like aliens had become completely dependent on human-developed food sources. Their population had grown from 2 billion to 8 billion over the past 20 years because of the increased food production. Now, with the crops failing, they were facing mass starvation. 7. The Zephyrian representative, who had been so confident about taking the Kepler mining rights, was now watching his people die. The Have Mind species was losing entire worker castes to hunger. Their attempts to return to traditional farming methods were failing because their population had grown too large for the old techniques to support. We need the human botanist back, 7 transmitted to the council. Our people are dying by the millions. The communication problems were getting worse too. Dr. Gary Thompson had developed the universal translation system that allowed different alien species to understand each other. The system was incredibly sophisticated, using artificial intelligence to translate not just words but concepts and cultural meanings. Without Gary's team to maintain the system, the translations were becoming more and more inaccurate. Diplomatic messages were being misunderstood. Trade negotiations were falling apart because the aliens couldn't communicate properly with each other. A trade dispute between the hegemony and the Outer Rim collective had escalated into a shooting war because of a mistranslation. The hegemony had tried to propose a peaceful solution, but the translation system had made it sound like a threat. Now 2 major alien powers were fighting a war that had started because of a computer error. The space transportation system was collapsing too. Human navigators had been training alien pilots for decades, but they had never shared their most advanced techniques. Captain Danny Rodriguez and his team had developed intuitive methods for reading hyperspace currents that couldn't be programmed into computers. Without human navigators, ships were getting lost in hyperspace. Trade routes that had been safe for decades were now dangerous. Several major shipping companies had lost entire fleets when their non-human pilots miscalculated hyperspace jumps. The economic impact was devastating. Trade between star systems had dropped by 80%. Worlds that depended on imported food and medicine were running out of supplies. The galactic economy, which had been growing steadily for decades, was collapsing. On the council station, Long-Nose Prime was receiving disaster reports from across the galaxy. 17 different species were facing existential threats. Their defense networks were failing. The food supplies were running out. The communication systems were breaking down. The transportation network was unreliable. How did this happen? He asked his advisors. How did we become so dependent on one species? The humans were very clever, one advisor replied. They made themselves useful in small ways. We didn't realize how all their small contributions added up to something essential. Long-Nose Prime felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. The proud galactic civilization that had existed for thousands of years was crumbling in just a few weeks. The species they had dismissed as primitive and unimportant had been holding their entire society together. Contact the human ambassador, he ordered. Tell him we need to talk. But Jake Morrison was no longer answering alien communications. He was busy on Earth, watching the reports from across the galaxy and planning humanity's next move. The aliens had finally learned what humans were really worth. Now it was time to discuss what that knowledge was going to cost them. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson about the value of respect and partnership, and the price of that lesson was getting higher every day. 2 months after the humans left, the Galactic Council held an emergency meeting. The beautiful crystal chamber that had once been filled with proud alien voices was now quiet and desperate. Many of the seats were empty because several species could no longer travel safely through space without human navigators. Long-Nose Prime looked around the room at the remaining council members. Diamond's geometric container was flickering badly, her energy form barely holding together. Seven's mandibles were clicking nervously as he thought about his starving people back home. The fish-like Aquarians were gasping in their water tanks because their life support systems were failing without human maintenance. "We must face the truth," Long-Nose Prime said slowly. "We need the humans back." The words hung in the air like a confession of failure. For months, the aliens had been telling themselves that they could solve their problems without human help. They had tried to fix the defense systems themselves. They had attempted to maintain the agricultural programs. They had worked to repair the communication networks. Everything they tried had failed. Shard-Prime, the crystalline representative of the hegemony, pulsed with dim, embarrassed light. "Perhaps we were too hasty in our assessment of human capabilities." Seven made a bitter clicking sound. "My people are dying by the thousands every day. Pride won't feed them. Nor will it restore our defenses," added the Aquarian representative, bubbles streaming from her gills. "The pirate attacks are getting worse. 3 more systems fell last week." Long-Nose Prime activated his communication device. "Send a message to Earth. Tell them we request an immediate meeting with Ambassador Morrison." The response came back within an hour. It was short and not very polite. "Ambassador Morrison is no longer available for council business. If you wish to discuss terms for human re-engagement with galactic affairs, contact President Walsh directly." The aliens had never been told to contact anyone other than human ambassadors before. The idea that they would have to speak directly to the human leader was shocking. In their minds, presidents and emperors only talked to each other as equals. They had never considered humans to be their equals. "They want us to talk to their president," Long-Nose Prime announced to the council. "Impossible," Shard Prime flashed. "We are ancient civilizations. We do not negotiate with primitive planetary leaders. Then we can watch our civilizations die while maintaining our dignity," Seven replied sharply. "My people care more about food than pride." The debate continued for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. The aliens had no choice. They needed human help to survive, and the humans were no longer willing to work under the old system. If they wanted to save their civilizations, they would have to swallow their pride and meet human demands. Long-Nose Prime personally composed the message to President Walsh. It was the hardest thing he had ever written. In the message, he admitted that the council had made mistakes. He acknowledged that human contributions had been undervalued. He requested negotiations for the return of human cooperation. President Susan Walsh received the message while she was meeting with her top advisors. She read it twice before showing it to the others in the room. "They're ready to talk," she said. "The question is, what do we want from them?" General Adams leaned forward in his chair. "Complete restructuring of the galactic government. No more council where they can outvote us on everything. We need equal representation and veto power over major decisions." Dr. Carter nodded. "And proper compensation for our technologies. We've been giving away billions of credits worth of innovations for free. That ends now. Don't forget guarantees," added Secretary of Defense Robert Stone. "We need ironclad promises. But they can't just go back to the old ways once the immediate crisis passes." President Walsh thought about the demands they would make. Humanity had learned a valuable lesson from this crisis. They had power, but only if they were willing to use it. The aliens would agree to anything right now because they were desperate. But humans needed to make sure the new agreements would last. "Draft a response," she ordered. "Tell them we're willing to discuss terms, but only for a complete restructuring of galactic government. The council system is finished. We'll only work with a federation of equals." The alien response was immediate acceptance. They agreed to everything. Complete governmental restructuring, equal representation for humans, veto power over major decisions, fair compensation for human technologies, legal protections for human innovations. The aliens signed every agreement without even trying to negotiate better terms. But President Walsh was suspicious. "It's too easy," she told her advisors. "They're agreeing to everything because they're desperate. What happens when the immediate crisis is over? Will they try to go back to the old system?" Dr. Carter had been thinking about the same problem. "That's why we need to make the new system irreversible. We need to build permanent dependencies into the structure." "What do you mean?" General Adams asked. "Right now, they need us to fix their immediate problems," Dr. Carter explained. "But we should make sure they continue to need us permanently. We share some knowledge, but not all of it. We fix some systems, but we maintain control over the most critical parts." President Walsh understood. "We become partners, not servants. But we make sure the partnership can't be easily broken." The formal negotiations began on Luna, humanity's moon. The symbolism was intentional. For the first time in galactic history, alien leaders had to come to human space for important talks. They had to acknowledge that humans were no longer the junior partners begging for acceptance. Jake Morrison led the human negotiating team. Sitting across from him were the most powerful beings in the galaxy, all of them desperate for human help. Long-Nose Prime looked tired and defeated. Diamond's container was being supported by emergency power cells. Seven was visibly thinner, his people's starvation affecting him directly through their hive-mind connection. "The old council system is finished," Jake announced at the start of the talks. "We're here to discuss the formation of a new galactic federation. A federation where humanity has equal status and equal rights." The aliens agreed immediately. They had no choice. "We also require retroactive compensation for 30 years of undervalued human contributions," Jake continued. "Our economists have calculated the total value at approximately 50 billion credits." Again, immediate agreement. "Finally, we require guarantees that human rights and status cannot be reduced without human consent. Any attempt to return to the old system will result in immediate human withdrawal." The aliens signed everything. They promised everything. They agreed to every human demand without hesitation. Their civilizations were collapsing, and they would have agreed to almost anything to get human help back. But as the documents were signed, Jake noticed something in the aliens' eyes. Relief, yes. Gratitude, perhaps. But also calculation. They were already thinking about the future, about how they might modify these agreements once the crisis passed. President Walsh had been right to be suspicious. The aliens were desperate now, but desperation was temporary. The real test would come later, when their immediate problems were solved and they started to resent the new balance of power. But humans had learned from this experience too. They had discovered their own strength. They had seen what happened when they stood up for themselves. And they were not going to let the galaxy forget that lesson. The new federation was about to begin, but the real challenge would be making it last. 1 year after the signing of the Federation Charter, Jake Morrison stood in the same crystal chamber where he had walked out in anger. But everything was different now. The room had been rebuilt and redesigned. Instead of the old council setup, where aliens looked down at humans from high seats, the new Federation Assembly had a circular design where every species sat at the same level. Jake was no longer just an ambassador. He was now the Secretary General of the Galactic Federation, elected by all member species. The title felt strange after decades of being treated like a second-class citizen, but he had earned it through the most dramatic political change in galactic history. President Susan Walsh had been re-elected for a second term, based largely on her handling of the galactic crisis. She was visiting the Federation station for the first anniversary celebration of the charter signing. As she looked around the assembly hall, she could see how much things had changed. Dr. Kevin Walsh had returned to his medical work, but now as the director of Federation Health Services. His budget was 10 times larger than anything he had worked with before. The new medical protocols he developed were being implemented across the galaxy, and for the first time, humans were getting full credit and compensation for their innovations. Zephyrian mining operation in the Kepler asteroid belt had been a complete disaster without human expertise. After 6 months of failed attempts and several expensive accidents, Seven had quietly asked human engineers to take over the project. Now it was the most profitable mining operation in the galaxy, and humans received 40% of the profits as the discoverers and managers. Captain Danny Rodriguez was now Admiral Rodriguez, head of the Federation Navigation Command. The transportation crisis had been solved, but only because humans maintained control over the most advanced navigation techniques. Alien pilots could learn the basic methods, but the complex hyperspace calculations remained a human specialty. The agricultural programs were running better than ever under Dr. Helen Rogers' expanded Agricultural Development Authority. She had returned to save the failing crops, but only after negotiating a treaty that gave humans permanent oversight of all food production programs. The galaxy would never again face starvation due to mismanaged farming, but the transition hadn't been smooth. Some alien species had trouble accepting their new status as equals rather than superiors. The hegemony, in particular, had tried several times to restore the old power structure. They had attempted to form a separate alliance of advanced species. That would exclude humans and other younger civilizations. Each attempt had failed quickly. The hegemony discovered that their energy-based technology was completely dependent on human mathematical support. When they tried to break away from the Federation, their most basic systems started failing within days. They had no choice but to return and accept human partnership. The Aquarians had also tried to challenge human authority in the early months. They claimed that humans were too emotional to make important decisions about galactic security. Their rebellion lasted exactly 1 week, until pirate attacks on their shipping lanes reminded them why they needed human design. Defense Systems. Dr. Lisa Carter had become the Federation's chief technology officer, with authority over all major technological development projects. She had created a new system where human innovations were protected by strict patent laws. Any species that wanted to use human technology had to pay licensing fees and follow human safety protocols. The old system was designed to exploit us, Dr. Carter explained to President Walsh during their meeting. The new system ensures that our contributions are valued and protected. We're not giving away our knowledge for free anymore. The economic transformation had been remarkable. Under the old council system, humans had been among the poorest members of galactic civilization, despite their contributions. Now, human worlds were some of the wealthiest in the galaxy. The patent fees and technology licenses had generated enormous wealth that was being used to improve human colonies and fund new research projects. But the most important change was psychological. Humans no longer saw themselves as the junior members of galactic civilization. They had proven that they were essential, not just useful. The galaxy needed them more than they needed the galaxy. Young humans growing up in the Federation had a completely different attitude than previous generations. They expected to be treated as equals. They demanded fair compensation for their work. They refused to accept the kind of condescending treatment that their parents had endured. Amy Foster, now Jake's Deputy Secretary General, represented this new generation of human leaders. She had been young and idealistic during the old council days, watching humans be dismissed and exploited. Now she was helping to run a galactic government where humans had real power and influence. "Sometimes I can't believe how much has changed," she told Jake as they prepared for the anniversary ceremony. "A year ago, we were walking out in protest. Now we're running the galaxy." "Not running it," Jake corrected her. "Sharing and running. That's the difference between the old system and the new one. The anniversary ceremony was attended by representatives from all 47 member species. Longnose Prime, now serving as Deputy Secretary General under Jake, gave a speech acknowledging the mistakes of the old council system. "We learned that true strength comes from cooperation among equals, not domination by the powerful," he said. "The humans taught us that lesson by showing us what we would lose if we continued to treat our partners unfairly." Diamond, her energy form now stable thanks to continued human mathematical support, added her own thoughts. "The Federation has made us all stronger. We are more prosperous, more secure, and more innovative than we ever were under the old system." But Jake knew that the real test of the Federation would come in the future. The current system worked because the memory of the crisis was still fresh. The aliens remembered what had happened when they lost human cooperation. But memories faded, and new generations might be tempted to repeat old mistakes. That's why the Federation Charter included permanent safeguards. Human veto power couldn't be removed without human consent. Technology sharing agreements were legally binding for at least 50 years. And most importantly, humans retained the right to withdraw from the Federation if their rights were violated. President Walsh addressed the Assembly at the end of the ceremony. "The Federation has succeeded because it's built on mutual respect and fair treatment. We hope this system will last for centuries. But if it doesn't, if some future generation decides to return to the old ways of exploitation and dismissal, they should remember what happened 1 year ago." Her words were a subtle reminder to everyone present. Humans had walked away once when they were treated unfairly. They had proven they could survive without the galaxy better than the galaxy could survive without them. And they would walk away again, if necessary. The galaxy had learned to respect human contributions. But more importantly, humans had learned to respect themselves. They were no longer willing to accept second-class treatment. They had discovered their own worth and demanded that others recognize it. As the ceremony ended and the representatives returned to their ships, Jake looked out at the stars through the chamber's crystal walls. Somewhere out there, human engineers were maintaining defense systems that protected billions of lives. Human doctors were curing diseases that had plagued alien species for centuries. Human teachers were educating the next generation of galactic leaders. The galaxy was a better place because humans had finally stood up for themselves. And it would continue to be better as long as humans remembered the lesson they had learned. Sometimes you have to walk away to discover your true value. And sometimes that courage to leave is exactly what it takes to build something better than what came before. The Federation was proof that equals could accomplish more together than masters and servants ever could apart.